mention. Now, do you all have your pieces of paper?
Yes.
Hands up those who do not have their pieces of paper. Now, does anybody or can anybody guess the purpose of this piece of paper?
Write on.
It is to write on. Very good. Yes, yes, that's right. You're going to write on it. If you're a woman, I want your statistics and phone number. Now, what is going to happen is that during the course of this panel, I'm going to ask you 3 questions related to Blake 7. Right? Well, all right then, related to something else if you prefer. But what will happen is that I will ask you, and as you see, it's numbered 1, 2, 3. You write down the answer that you think is the correct answer to the question. Towards the end of the panel, I will then ask who knows the answers. We have, I think, some pieces of paper to pull out.
Yeah.
And then you'll be doing that. They have numbers, and you stand up, and if you get the question right, you win a prize. So there are 3 prizes.
What happens if they get it wrong?
If they get it wrong, they take all their clothes off and await my pleasure. That's the female.
Right.
You can jump out the window. Lava, my dear, thank you. This is coffee. My lifespan. So there you are. During the course of the thing, I will ask the 3 questions, and at the end I will announce what the actual prizes are. And I do assure you that 1 or 2 of them are worthwhile. The 3rd one, bit iffy. Some people might like it. Right. Why don't I ask you a question right away? All right. Now, this is an easy one to start with, and you just write it down. You don't shout it out or anything, because you don't want anybody else to know in case they steal the prize from you. And the answer is a very simple one, if you get it right. Difficult if you get it wrong. How many episodes did Glynis Barber appear in Blake 7? Just write that down. That's question 1. Write it down. And don't say anything to anybody, and no peeking. I saw you look over at his. Stop it. That's how you got your doctorate. Yes. Right, that's the first question. I'll give you the second one later on. All right, now this is my panel. But you only warn you that, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So, does anybody want to ask me any questions? Right, that's it. Nobody wants to ask me any questions? How many episodes of Glynis Barber appear in? Andrew, are you feeling better this morning?
No.
Oh, I think Andrew did a marvellous job last night running that disco, because I was standing up there with him. I wouldn't know how to work it. And I'm a computer expert. Shall we give him a round of applause? Yeah, you did a great job. Very enjoyable. Kept me awake.
You said yesterday your ambition was to play Coriolanus in the future. I was wondering which Shakespeare character would you find the least interesting to play and why?
The least interesting Shakespeare character. I tend to like most of Shakespeare, in fact all of it. But there are parts to which obviously I'm not suited. Well, actually, funnily enough, I have played Juliet. Or when I was at school. No, Falstaff, wonderful part, because you can pad up, you know. I tend the parts which I call the silly parts, although they're not silly. They can be played by an actor of greater ability and experience than myself. For example, Trinculo. Michael Keating would be a wonderful Trinculo, but I think I'd be disastrous. You know. So I tend to avoid that sort of role. The comics, the low comics, the Lancelot Gobbos of this world.
Thanks.
So, but Coriolanus, yes, I'll do it one day. Good fit, had to give up smoking with that. Yes, ma'am.
You turned down the Lord of Mercutio when you took up the offer to play Aegon. Do you feel that you've lost that chance for good, or do you think Mercutio might still come around again?
I turned down the role of Mercutio. For those of you who are ill-educated, that is a character in Romeo and Juliet. It's a marvellous part. It has a speech, one of the most famous speeches in Shakespeare called the Queen Mab speech. And I wanted to play Mercutio. Juliet was going to be played by Michelle de Treese, who is Mrs. Equalizer. And Romeo was Clive Francis, if you've ever seen any of his work. And I was going to be Mercutio. But the money wasn't very good. It's a wonderful part, but the money wasn't great. And this fellow Avon popped up. And so I decided to do this instead. I'm glad I did, because I don't think Mercutio would have brought me to New Zealand. Who knows?
Can you do the speech?
No, I can't remember it offhand. If somebody's got a copy, I'll read it for you. But, yes, I do regret, obviously, not doing it, but then I did something which was better for me. Whether the chance has gone, I wouldn't know. I would guess not. I would guess it might crop up sometime. It's done fairly frequently in Romeo and Juliet. It's more likely to come than Coriolanus, frankly. So, maybe. We'll see. I do regret not doing as much Shakespeare as I would have liked. On the other hand, I wouldn't want to go to the Royal Shakespeare Company because, well, I don't really like the system. Somebody actually, I did an audition for them when I very first started as an actor many years ago. And they wrote to me and they said, "You are far too individual a performer for an ensemble company like ours." And I didn't quite know what that meant. And I said to a friend of mine, Paul Damon, who's a very distinguished actor, I said, "What does that mean?" He says, "It means you're a star." I don't like those. Right. Yes, sir.
If you had your choice of non-Shakespearean drama, which male lead would you prefer to play?
Non-Shakespearean drama, what male lead would I prefer to play? Well, Lewis Collins and I always wanted to play James Bond for the money. But Tim Dalton's got it. So James Bond would have been fun to do, actually, if the scripts came back to the jokiness that they had in the early stages when Sean Connery was doing it. That would have been fun. You got to travel expensively. Pretty girls, etc. Would have been fun. But other than that, I've been very fortunate in the number of roles that I've had in the theatre, particularly. They're very wide-ranging. And offhand, I can't think of one. I can think of many. Obviously, there's quite a lot of Ibsen, Chekhov, and so on that I haven't done, that I would like to do. Modern plays interest me. If somebody writes a good one, I'll do it. I'm doing one in the new year, but it's a thriller. No, but it's a thriller. It's a very good thriller. So I tend to get off these thrillers because I always end up murdering people in them. My nephew came to see me, he's 10, in a play, very bright boy, and a play called Sting in the Tail, and an actor in it called Garfield Morgan, who was in the Sweeney. I don't know if you saw that. Garfield said to him very politely, "What do you think of the play?" He said, "I thought it was very good." He's a 10-year-old. He said, "Did you guess who'd done it?" He said, "Oh yes, Uncle Paul did it." Uncle Paul always does it. So, there's quite a lot of roles. I have to think about that, perhaps. Yes, ma'am.
I've heard that there's an interesting story behind your hairstyle for Donkey and Son.
An interesting story behind my hairstyle for Donkey and Son. There is rather. The makeup department, that is, said we would like you to have your hair permed. We feel that it would be good for the period, and also having just played Avon, where you had it sort of boofed and so on, it would look very different. So I agreed, and I was sent to Her Majesty the Queen's hairdresser, Neville Daniel, in Bond Street. God knows what it cost, but they paid for it anyway. And I had the hair permed, and I looked at myself, and I thought I looked a right poofter. And when I walked out into Sloane Street, I thought the last person I want to meet is anybody I know. And the first person I met was Stephen Greif. He said, "Hello, Ducky." It's always the way, isn't it?
What did Janet say when you got home?
Well, somebody ended up calling me Bubbles after that. She found it a bit, wearying. It is extraordinary when you're married to someone like me. The poor girl has to wake up every morning. One year it's permed, and this last year it's been jet black with sideburns, sort of, "Hi, baby, make some coffee, Wonderful. A bit frightening, actually. But that's the story behind that. I did have it in my contract, though, that they would take the perm out at the end, and they did, but it was still a bit curly. But not nearly as curly as Stephen Pacey. Yes, dear.
If you had not gone into acting, what would you have done?
If I hadn't gone into acting, what would I have done? Terry Nation said I should have gone into politics. Or religion. Jim and Tammy, they were doing great, Jim and Tammy Baker. Get tried for corruption. My father wanted me to be a lawyer. The world is full of lawyers, however. The wonderful thing about being an actor is that you can play all the things that we ever wanted to be. Well, you know, it's fantasy, isn't it? We all have role-playing ideals. I actually do them for a living. It's wonderful. The only people who really understand are such as you. You understand. And children understand, you know. It's amazing. Other people think you put on makeup, you walk on stage, and you pretend to be somebody else for a living. It's crazy when you think about it. But I do love doing it. Of course, there's a lot of unemployment. So that's tricky. But a lawyer I would have been, I expect. Yes.
Best part you liked about playing Avon?
The best thing I liked about playing Avon was that it was the best part.
Would you do anything to change the character?
Would I do anything to change the character? No. Obviously, technically, as a performer, when you look back at something you've done, as television allows us to do, you think, oh, you know, maybe I'd have changed that, made it a little bit tighter. It's like, you know, watching a football match. I should have scored there, you know. So there are one or two, yes, technical alterations, but generally speaking, I was very, very fortunate, unlike the others. Michael was semi-fortunate. They didn't write to him quite as well as they wrote to me. I was able to develop it pretty much the way I wanted to. There were odd episodes which I would have changed or ditched, like animals like Harvest of Kairos. I'd have ditched them, put in something else, like mine. You know, but otherwise, no. I kept him fairly enigmatic. The book I've written, I keep him fairly enigmatic in that, too. It's up to you to make up your mind about him, and I think that that's the way that Terry Nation writes. I like that. Terry says, you know, here's a little hint of something, see what the actor does with it. Then you do that. Terry says, oh, that's the way you want to go. Oh, right, that's the way we'll go. And we go that way, and then the audience feedback comes. For example, at the end of the episode Star 1, do you remember that? The director said to me, when Gareth Blake, as Blake, turns to you and says, for what it's worth, Avon, I always trusted you. I don't know if you remember that line. He said, I'm going to give you a big close-up, and I want to see your real opinion of Blake in your eyes. So I looked. And somebody said to me, I could tell you hated the bastard. And my mother, God rest her soul, she said, I could tell you really liked it. So it's up to you. And I think that that's where Terry, particularly, and the actors who were in Blake 7, without exception, were clever, in that we did not underestimate the intelligence and opinion of our audience, whereas I think some series do. So, no, it's a simple answer. I wouldn't change it very much, but I'd like to develop him, of course. Yes,
I
ma'am?
really like it. Do you ever get to read any of the fan fiction that's around?
Do I read the fan fiction? I did in the early stages, and I tell you what happened was that piles of it came in. As soon as you say, oh, I really like that, people say, oh, you must read this, and this, and suddenly we had about 300 zines. And, okay, if you're not working, and it's a nice sunny day, you sit in the garden and you read something. But if you are working, and I work quite a lot, you don't have the time. So in the early stages, I did. In fact, I read one. I was so impressed with it, I forgot the name of it now. But it was a few years ago, and I actually took it in to the producer and said, I think this would make a marvelous episode. And he said, yes, it would, but it would be too expensive. But he did write to the lady in question and said, this was quite special, and it was. Very clever idea. Rather on the lines of sarcophagus. Anyway, Terry Nation's idea is in the event that the series was to be revived or a spin-off or whatever, he would ask for some fan episodes to be sent to him, and he would guarantee that one or two would be used. Smart move, really, because you get the minimum fee. On the other hand, your work would be done, you know, if you're a writer. So I think that's a good idea. He'll definitely do that at some stage. It's gone quiet.
When you say he'll definitely do that at that stage, do you mean he's definitely planning the fifth series? Or he'll definitely...
He has a fifth series, well, he has a spin-off series in his mind, yes. In fact, he told me about it. It's a very good idea. He said you can't do a fifth series per se because all the people are dead apart from one or two that he likes and will keep in, you know. Happy to say that I'm one of them. Yes, he's got an idea. And what we need is the interest to kick. It is in the United States, and I have to say that that's where the money is, so that's where it's most likely to come from. I have this book coming out. The other books are going to be re-released. Blake 7 is just building in various areas over there. Once it plays LA, Los Angeles, then interest may kick and he may do the spin-off. If it doesn't, then he may do something else sort of roughly disguised. You know, it's really quite simple. But what you need is the financial backing and the interest, and suddenly it'll come. And Blake Seven started because he went to lunch with the BBC and they said, we need something sort of new, there's an interest in science fiction, can you think of something? And he just sat there and he said, how about the Dirty Dozen in outer space? And they said, great, go and write it. And then hence Blake Seven.
Given the difference in styles, do you think Blake Seven will come out the same as the American Ted Later?
No, I think I mentioned this before, I managed to talk to the Star Trek people at some length, and they are very interesting because it starts with special effects on grabbing the audience with an explosion, with a spacecraft or whatever. Our system was to grab them with a conflict of character. And George Takei, who I talked to at greatest length about this, said, I really envy that. But he said Leonard Nimoy is very well aware of that and is trying to get the scripts really tightened up so that the characters do have some greater input than they had before. No, it wouldn't have been. On the other hand, now, with the experience that we've had with Star Trek, with all these TV series, a group of actors from all over the world, Australians, New Zealanders, Americans, Canadians, Brits, etc., together would be quite interesting. Input is very good for you. Do you know what I mean by that? You get kicked by another actor. If he's good, if he's different, if he gives you something, then the sparks fly, and it's very exciting. Feedback, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
In your book, you said that Avon's brother wasn't actually a blood relation.
Right. How do you know that? Did I tell you? Oh, right. No, I always felt that Avon would be an only child. So no, I got round the brother. Anyway, I always thought that was ludicrous. And if you remember when the brother, the so-called brother, was put up on the screen, he was blonde and blue-eyed, and I'm rather dark and, you know, lovely. And I didn't fancy the idea of a brother, so no. You want me to tell you how I get around it?
Yeah.
All right. You ever heard of a brother officer? Yeah. All right. Well, I have him go to a military college where, as a new member, he is twinned with an older cadet who shows him the ropes, and he is called his brother officer. All right. And so he says, my brother, for this period of time. That's how I get around it. He kills him. Yeah. Actually, he doesn't, but he does get bumped off. Yes.
In Tony Yetwood's Afterlife, Avon's got a sister. Did you read that?
Has he? Did I read it? I read a little of it. Next. Yes.
Of all the varied guests you've had on Blake Seven, was there any that were more memorable to work with?
Oh, the guests on Blake Seven. It became a cult thing, you know, to become a guest, rather like on Batman. Adam West was telling me about this. He says, you know, everybody wanted to be on Batman. And pretty well everybody wanted to be on Blake Seven. Peter Davison, some of you may know him. I met him in the canteen at the BBC when he was doing All Creatures Great and Small, and he's a great science fiction fan. And he said, I really would love to do an episode of Blake Seven. And I mentioned this to David Maloney and said, Peter wants to do an episode, why don't you get him to come in and play Baddy or something? And he said, I can't. And I said, why not? And he said, well, I'll tell you sometime. It was because they were considering him for Doctor Who. And they didn't want to use him. But Robert Stevens, very distinguished actor, wanted to be in it, and I said to producer Bob Stevens, who'd like to do an episode, he didn't believe me. Because Bob is a very distinguished classical actor. But we did get a few people in that I found very entertaining to work with. Julian Glover is a very good actor, and I worked with him again on Donkey and Son. But I like the women. What I did feel, actually, on a serious note, is that there wasn't much of a challenge to Avon, do you know what I mean, later on, once the Blake character had gone. And once Curly was fairly obviously no problem, you know. So there wasn't anybody particularly memorable, but in the fifth series maybe there would be. I liked Dr. Paxton, she was very nice. Barbara Shelley. She used to tell wonderful jokes. I daren't repeat them. She was great fun. So I suppose I liked her, and sadly I have to say Roy Kinnear, who died recently, was a lovely man. Lovely man. Very, very amusing. There's a moment in Gold, yes, when Glynis, I think I mentioned this before, Glynis Barber wasn't very good with a gun. When it came out of the holster, it used to fire. And there's a moment when, as she draws, Roy and I step back. You watch it. It's quite good. And he said a wonderful story once. The three of us were on location, he and Glynis and I. And the director said, okay, this happens, this happens, this happens, and we end up with a big close-up on Paul. So Glynis said, oh, why do we end up on Paul? And she's South African. And Roy Kinnear said, you end on the money, love. You know. He said, it's wonderful. He said, you leave it to him. Because what happens is, he said, I'm at Paul's shoulder and so are you. If it's a big hit, they say, hey, Roy Kinnear and Glynis Barber were in that show with Paul Darrow. If it's rubbish, they say, what were Roy Kinnear and Glynis Barber doing with Paul Darrow? You know? So he said, we can't lose. He's the one who's going to lose. Yes. Or win. Very nice man. So yes, he was one of them I enjoyed working with. Yes, sir.
How'd you get on with Jackie Pierce?
Real well. Oh, I don't classify Jackie as a guest star. She was permanent, yeah. Oh, really well. I've known Jackie for many years. We were at drama school together. Rather. And Jackie's a star, behaves like one. Some people find that irritating. I find it rather amusing. And I tend to pander to it, you know, because when she delivers the goods, she really does deliver the goods, and I thought she was wonderful. Wonderful to serve her. And the great disappointment was they cut her out of the last episode. That really hurt her. Really hurt her.
Why?
It was called Chris Boucher's Revenge, I think. They decided she would. When I say she behaves like a star, some people might interpret that as difficult, you know, and some people are not prepared to put up with it. Well, I think if you deliver the goods, you should. I mean, Judy Garland was difficult, but she was also magical, so I'd accept that. And that's why. Pity, but there you go. Shellfish kid. I'm scratching your nose, were you asking me a question?
I'm scratching my nose.
Oh, really? Better now? Yes, ma'am.
You talked about the actors that appeared in Blake 7. Was there any guest character that you would like to have seen retained?
Is there any guest character that I would like to have seen retained in Blake 7? No. I would have liked to have got rid of quite a few of them myself. No, I didn't think so. I thought the guests were pretty good in the sphere in which they appeared. There was, it was a...
I was just thinking in particular of Dorian.
Dorian, yes, that was a very good character, played by the late Geoffrey Burridge, who was a friend of ours for many years. I'm sad about that. Geoffrey was terrific in that, yeah. I think it's one of the most popular guest artists. Yes, he was, I should have mentioned that, yeah, he was very good in that. Yes, that would have been interesting. I feel that Dorian may very well have been very good competition for Avon. Yes. So, yes, it's not a bad idea. It didn't occur to me, but pretty good idea. Oh, yes, because, as I said earlier, an actor feeds off another actor. See, Stephen was marvellous in what he did, Stephen Pacey. But he was that much younger, he was that much more gauche. And I was very well established, you know, and they kept saying to him, out cool, Paul. And he said, I can't. Which he couldn't, because I was already there. So Stephen said, you know, they said it's going to be like Starsky and Hutch with you. But in fact it isn't. He said, you're Starsky and I don't know who I am. Yes, Dorian would have been interesting. The other interesting thing was that Stephen said that when he played Dieter Tarrant, you know, his brother in that Death Watch episode, he thought Dieter was a better part than Del, you know. And he was right, I think. Yes, sir.
Does Avon have a preference for blondes, brunettes, or alien telepaths?
Does Avon have a preference for blondes, brunettes, or alien telepaths? Just women. No, I don't think he was all that fussy. I know he liked them all. Killed them all. Yeah. Except Callie. Oh no, she died too, didn't she? It always amazed me that when she died, she called out Blake. Never quite forgave her for that. Let me ask you another question for your little piece of paper. Okay, this is the second. The first question was how many episodes did Dennis Barber appear in? That's fairly straightforward. This one's a little more difficult. What internationally famous actor's middle name is the same as that of the first name of Avon? In other words, his middle name is Kerr, and he is an internationally famous actor of great. All right? The committee are not allowed to come in on this because they know, because I've tried these questions out on them. All right? If you know, write it down, and we will check it out later. And you get a prize. So there's one more question to come on that piece of paper. Right, anybody want to ask me anything? Apart from what internationally famous actor shows me? Yes?
Did you all coordinate together how you're going to play a particular scene? Or did you all just decide, well, I'm going to play it this way, somebody else decides I'll play it this way, and get different
Yes, did we agree or disagree on the way we should play the scenes? I'll tell you a story. At one point, we had a very young and eager director who had never been on the show before, but he was very keen, and he called us all together, and he said, now what I want to do is improvise and all this and this and this and this and this. And I said, but we have already established our characters, we don't need to do that, we know what we're doing. And he said, well, I must insist that you do. So I said, this is a democracy. Everybody does what I say. And he had the grace to laugh, and he said, fine. And that was the only time we had any problems like that, because we knew exactly what we were doing. We were kept in as a machine. The only things we discussed were things like, Stephen, for example, said to me, how do we hold the gun? I want to do it that way. That was fine by me, because I did it like that. So that was all right. That's those little things. But otherwise, we did our own thing within the confines of the script.
But as actors, do you decide, well, I'm going to play the scene this way, and the person playing opposite?
Well, no, yes, actors tend to do that instinctively anyway. They play their own way. And it works or it doesn't work. You'll find that another actor will be dominant in the scene. You always have that. And what you have to do is concede it if it's a better scene for him or her, or take it if it's yours. And in Avon's case, it was generally his. So I never really had any problems. A good actor will always respond to you, as I said earlier on. You'll get the feedback. And she or he will usually get better if they're working with a better actor or someone who knows more what he's doing. And vice versa. In my case, because it was Avon, I knew what I was doing. And they tended to go along with that. So I thought it worked quite well. Right. Yes, ma'am. Ooh, you full of questions this morning. You went to bed early, obviously, yes.
How did you feel when you first read the script for Orbit?
How did I feel when I first read the script for Orbit? Michael read the script before I did and called me and told me about it. The thing about Robert Holmes, sadly now dead, was that when you got a Bob Holmes script, you knew it was a good one. So I never really bothered to read them until we got into it. And Michael just called me and said, hey, this is a goodie. And I said, well, it doesn't surprise me. And he said, you tried to throw me off a spaceship. And I said, yeah, they should have thought of that long ago. I thought it was very good. I thought Michael was very good in it. I thought it was one of his... He always says his best episode was City at the Edge of the World. I think that was his best episode, actually, from an acting point of view. Good though he was in City. I thought it was a great episode. I thought it was perfectly logical that he would throw Phil off, just as I would throw you off if you are, and you would be trying to throw me off too. Yes?
You say there was no conflict of characters in the latest series, but there was a lot of interesting characters in relationship with Avon and Villa.
Yes.
What was Avon's opinion really on Villa?
What was Avon's real opinion of Villa? Sympathy, pity, disdain. Avon's opinion of Villa was that he was a good foil, and that he was utterly trustworthy because he would go along with a winner, and Avon always knew he was going to win. So he knew he'd get back up. He's one of those people that is very shrewd and switches sides at just the right moment. And Avon was very well aware of that, and rather admired that sneakiness. It was much more cunning, I think, to Villa than a lot of people think. And I think Michael would agree with that. It was a much subtler performance than people think. Not you, because you know the series. It's a bit wonky. Is there anybody there? So his opinion of him was that in a slightly different light, he understood him. He knew how he ticked. He knew how predictable he was. As David Niven once said about Errol Flynn, you always knew where you stood with Errol. He would always let you down. Avon understood Villa and knew which way he would jump. The wonderful line, "You're always safe with me." Wonderful line. Yes?
In the first few episodes, you seemed to get on pretty well with Jenna. Was that because you were both intelligent and you understood each other, or because of your general liking of women?
Did I get on with Jenna because I liked her for her intelligence or because she was a woman? A combination of both, I think. I didn't think she was too bright, candidly, because she turned me down when I said we could steal the Liberator and go and find our own planet. She said no. I couldn't believe it. Thousands of letters came in saying, "Silly girl." How right they were, because, series later, whoops, she's away. No, I think that Avon's feeling towards Jenna was that she was bright, she was useful to him. He was a user. He was an honest user. He was always very honest, Avon. If he said he was going to kill you, he'd do it. You laugh, but that's true. He would. He was always very honest. He was very much also, people say to me, he was a male chauvinist. I don't think he was at all. He treated women as equals. And Blake didn't. Which was interesting, I thought, in the construction of the piece. Yes?
Blake Seven, The Return of Aurak.
The Wrath of Aurak. That would be good, wouldn't it? No, well, if you think about it, it could be quite useful. I mean, Aurak could revive everybody, or somebody, anyway.
It's quite an interesting possibility because Silverlane doesn't end up with him, like the plot suggests. And of course, see, Tarrant gets shot in the arm, which means he's not actually dead.
Oh, he's dead. He is definitely dead. Tarrant is dead as a dodo. As is Blake. No, it's quite interesting though, isn't it, that, you hit on a rather good point that somebody came up with, but the reason, when Avon's standing there at the end and smiles with all those guards around him, he has the most powerful computer in the universe. He knows where it is. Would you kill him?
No.
Right. So there's a good excuse, isn't there, for everyone being alive? Being tortured viciously. Wonderful stuff. And then in comes Servalan and says, "No, I want his body." Right at the back.
How did you react when you heard that all the characters were going to be killed off?
How did I react when I heard that they were all going to be killed off? I knew that Blake would be killed off and I volunteered to kill him. That was all right. And then it was suggested that several of the other characters would be killed off, not me. I knew that I would not be killed. And Jacqueline would not be either. So my reaction was, well, if they wanted to do that, I actually said, well, why aren't you killing me off as well? I'd have a really spectacular death or something. And they said, no, we'd like to keep our options open. But with the others, we'll kill them. What I disapproved of was that it was done so quickly. Because the characters are very good characters, and I think maybe if you were going to kill them off, you should have had an episode where Villa got killed off, where Tanner got killed off. But it all happened in the space of about 3 minutes, which was mind-boggling. Although it was very well done, I thought. I thought it was fair enough. If you want to kill the characters off, it's fine by me. Yes.
So, all of the Scorpio crew, except yourself, were actually killed in the last episode.
There is a possibility that one or two of them may not have died. As Michael says, when he was hit, he was supposed to be hit in the back, but he fell backwards. I think he lost his sense of direction. He finds it difficult, you know, to tell his right from his left. No, I think that was deliberate. So there is a possibility, you see. Hence the coming in Villa that I was mentioning earlier on. Villa is the one, the key, actually, isn't he, to a revival. Because it's obvious that Avon is left standing, and you think, and then suddenly Villa comes along, and you think, oh, he wasn't killed. Now, why wasn't he killed? He fell backwards. So, where was he hit? And blah, blah, blah. All sorts of possibilities. And Terry's purported, or rather, not purported, it is actual, but in his actual ideas for a spin-off or whatever, Villa features quite strongly in that area of surprise revival. Oh gosh, you are eager for questions, yes?
Yeah, just thinking about what you're talking about. Okay, if your own brother is still left alive and he's Darrow, do we see a return to where you're taking redemption to get another liberator?
No, I don't think so. I think what you would have, this is only very sketchy ideas, but I think what was the fault, if there was a fault in Blake 7, is that we had all this wonderful equipment and we didn't do anything with it. We had the best spaceship, we had the best weapons and everything. How come we lost, you know? So I think if you're going to be a terrorist group, then you have to start from scratch. It's difficult to get weapons when you're in a situation like that which the Federation controls. Just as it would be difficult to get them in New Zealand, you know, if you wanted to do something, heaven forbid, against the government. So you would need the weapons, you would need the backup, you would need the discontent of the populace. That's the only way terrorists can survive. The Federation populace was not necessarily discontented, which I thought was a very clever idea. That dear old Blake, for all his good feeling for the people, actually destroyed some of them. I mean, in Horizon, the episode, I don't know if you remember that, he arrives on this planet, they're fairly civilized, they go back to the jungle at the end, and he says, oh, I've done a great thing there, you know, he's set them back 2,000 years. Unbelievable. So, yes.
In the episode Horizon, Avon walks into the teleport bay just as Blake and Jenna are discussing how likely it is that he'll waltz off of the ship without them. And then in Star One, you know, Blake turns around and says, for what it's worth, I've always trusted you from the very beginning. Did Avon believe him?
In Horizon, Jenna and Blake are discussing Avon's possible intention to steal the ship, how right they were, and ditch them, and then he says later on, for what it's worth, I always trusted you. Did Avon believe him? No. No, he wouldn't. You don't trust anybody. All right? I remember once, my father denies this blessing, but when I was a young boy, I was reading history, which I love, and there's the Earl of Strafford, I don't know if you remember him, the Earl of Strafford was beheaded on the orders of Charles I, King Charles I, and his last words were, put not thy trust in princes. And my father said to me once, if you can't put your trust in princes, who can you put your trust in? And I said, no one. And he said, right. And Avon feels very strongly about that. He trusted no one. Not even himself sometimes, yes sir.
If Avon and Villa are only left, why would they go back to terrorism?
Why would they go back to terrorism? In order to survive, because people will be out to get them. And they're very good at it. Are they? The point being that they were quite famous terrorists, like Carlos, you know, so the Jackal. So people would be out to get them. Also, they need to live. They like to live high on the hog. So they're thoroughly self-interested. It's crime, a life of crime, really, because they have no alternative. Yes.
When you say terrorism, would you envision following saying something like trench resistance or more like Baader-Meinhof?
Well, it's a matter of opinion, isn't it? If you're Nazi Germany and you and I are blowing up Nazis, we're heroes. From the Nazis' point of view, we're terrorists. It's a matter of opinion.
So that means Baader-Meinhof basically didn't really care who they blew up after that.
Well, neither did Blake, did he? At least Avon was selective. If people were trying to kill him, he killed them. first. But Blake, Avon wasn't all that interested in saving the universe. You know, the mob, the rabble, he said. You know. And what's that line? You can wade in your armpits in blood, which is what Blake was doing. Avon was much more selective. If they had the money, he took it. Yes?
Does this mean that Series 5 is actually going to be called the Avon Village?
No, it's going to be called Avon, special guest star, Baldy. Yes. You know. I guess if it happened, I mean, it's pie in the sky at the moment, but then that's what they said about Star Trek. So, who knows? I would guess, yes, certainly Michael would be a part of it, and Terry would write it, or neither of us would do it. I think it would be very good. But I don't like to build up hopes, even my own, by suggesting that it's going to happen, because it may not. In fact, the odds are very strongly against it happening, but then people said Mount Everest couldn't be climbed, didn't they? Yes?
Did you say you were going to do a sequel to your book?
Well, when a sequel to my book, the first book is a prequel, I think you know, to Blake 7, and ends up with Avon, my Avon, Claire Avon, coming on the spaceship and as a prisoner. And he sees this big guy in chains. And that is Blake, who's not mentioned by name. And then the book finishes roughly around that area. When I submitted it, they said, oh, this is rather good. Do you think you might like to write a sequel as well? And I said, sure, if you ask me to. And I haven't yet. But I'm going to New York and seeing these publishers, and if they say, yes, please write us one, then I will.
But it can't be a sequel to one.
No, it'd be a sequel to the series.
Oh, postgrad.
Yes.
Join the other thousands while they're done.
Right, exactly. But I have a slight in, you see.
In Sands, when Tarrant doesn't kill Silverland, and you look as if you'd like to kill him, and then say, oh, well, I wanted to kill him myself anyway, do you think he really means that because he's had previous opportunities to kill Silverland and he hasn't done it? Like an aftermath.
I think he was always rather reluctant to kill Silverland. She was such fun. I think at this particular stage that you're talking about in the fourth series, he was beginning, as somebody once said, to go off his trolley. That wasn't quite true, but the pressure was beginning to get to him. An obsession. And we all have obsessions in our lives. His was to find Blake and remove the spectre of his presence. In other words, make sure he was dead, and the only way you can do that is to kill him yourself. And that was always on my mind. And when you have Armageddon, you might as well get rid of everybody and do it yourself. And that was kind of part of what he was thinking of. Better the enemy you know. And he could manipulate her. He manipulated her very well, actually. Because she has plenty of opportunity to kill him, but doesn't. They liked each other. But indeed, the pressure was getting to him. I think it was just a dismissive statement in that episode. Curiously enough, it was written originally for Avon and Silver. So it didn't quite gel, I didn't think. It did for Jack. Thought she was wonderful in it. Yes, maybe. Who hasn't had a question? Yeah, most people think that he's looking for Blake in order to join up with him again. I never thought that, no. He's looking for him to exorcise the ghost of Blake, yes. I think that's what they told me, anyway. And I thought that was quite a good idea. And that's why I volunteered to kill him. It seemed logical. Well, you thought he was looking for him to get back together? You found that peculiar? No, I wouldn't find that peculiar. I'm sorry you did. No, actually, I'm glad you do, because that shows that you're a decent person. But under the circumstances in which Avon found himself, he couldn't control. He was not a leader as such. Do you understand what I mean? He wasn't interested in that. He wasn't interested in leading a team against oppression. That was not his field at all. And he really couldn't control. There was actually a line in Gold with Roy, where I think it does something like, you and your lot, Avon, and Stephen Pacey says, no, we're not his gang. We're not his gang. We're individuals as such. Quite right. Avon wasn't interested in having a gang. He was a loner. On the other hand, he couldn't function unless Blake was out of his way, because there was always that thought in the back of everybody's mind, particularly Villa, who was the sharpest of them all, who kept saying, "We're looking for Blake, aren't we?" And getting back to your question earlier on, what was the relationship with Villa? Avon could control Villa, but with Blake in the background, there was always somewhere for Villa to jump. Remove Blake, there's nowhere else for him to go but stay with Avon. Always get rid of the opposition, however close.
Paul, wasn't surely the shooting Blake was because he was shattered? Because I think I have it in common with 99.9% of the fans, is that every time Avon's cynical view of humanity, where he let it slip, where he actually trusted someone like Anna Grant and presumably a lot of people in the past, they let him down. Every time he let his guard down, they let him down.
Right.
That the reason he shot Blake was because that he was seeking him to sort of hand the reins over, say, look, you know, I don't want to do it anymore, get rid of him. And then he thought he had been betrayed, and that the reason he really shot him, and you you portrayed Avon as looking shattered, when, you know, you betrayed me.
Yes, but what I tried to portray in that, perhaps it didn't come across, but I hope it did, was that really he understood that this was the most likely thing to happen, that it was inevitable. So that the horror of the betrayal was, that's what I thought all along, that you were going to do it, and now you did. And it's significant that the Tarrant character is the one who tells him, I thought. But I asked the third question, hadn't I? I'm trying to remember what it was. 3 characters who claimed to know Avon before he ever met Blake. Just 3. Right, anybody want to ask me any more questions about my career, my sex life, or whatever? Yes?
In Blake 7, you spent time traveling around space to see other planets. Do you all believe in life on other planets?
Do I personally believe in life on other planets, and
Would you like to go into space?
would I like to go into space? I'm not sure about life on other planets. I had the pleasure of being made up in the same dressing room once when we were recording Blake 7 filming at Ealing with Dr. Jonathan Miller, of whom you may have heard. And he was sitting in the next makeup and we were discussing this for about an hour. And he said, and he's doctor, so he should know, he said, yes, of course there are other life forms, but not as we know. I mean, I'm not saying that little green people with antennae are going to come down, but that's entirely possible. There is, of course, a theory of the doppelganger, isn't there? That on the other side of the universe, perhaps, we reproduce ourselves. Our history reproduces. That's some kind of an illusion, isn't it? Yes, I think it's entirely possible. In fact, I think it's certain that there is life on other planets. Would I personally like to go and have a look at them? Yes, I think so. I doubt that I'll have the opportunity in my lifetime. But, yes, I'd be interested to meet someone from another planet who would tell me where I went wrong. The trouble is, it would be too late. Yes, Andrew? Do I have any interesting anecdotes from my 2 appearances on Doctor Who? Oh, I told you the other night that John Pertwee used to make me laugh. Still does. John, when I was doing that, it was many years ago. Whenever it was, thank you. And I was just about to go on. I was a bit nervous. I was quite a young actor at the time. And I was about to go on, and John suddenly said to me, they said, stand by. We were standing by. And John said, by the way, do you know how to kiss a duck's behind without getting a mouthful of feathers? And I said, no. And he said, you go, but you have to be quick. And I laughed, and they went, action. You know. So I was finished. Yeah. With Time Lash, which was the next one I did with Colin Baker, that was an idea of John Nathan Turner, who was the producer. He suddenly decided that he'd like guest stars from Blake 7. It kind of fizzled out after a while. Jackie did one and I did one. Candidly, I did it for the money. It was a very good offer. But I wanted to play it like Richard III. And I got halfway there. I had the long wig, but I didn't get the hump. Now that was quite fun. But I was told off for one scene, which was the last scene we ever filmed when we were doing Time Lash, because I played it the way I wanted to play it and not the way they wanted to play it. And they said, you know, you were setting it up, and we didn't want you to do that. And I said, listen, I'm talking to a cobra. I can't possibly take this seriously, can I? But I got told off for that. That's an interesting anecdote rather than a funny one, but it didn't worry me that I got told off. I thought it was a rather good scene. It was very badly written, I thought, but there you go. Yes?
Avon and the girl against terrorism, or Series 5, will it be violent and political, or will it be something more...
Oh, you'd have to... if there was another series, would it be violent and political, or would it be serious?
Would it be economic terrorism, which would be a little more, I think, to your characters?
Economic piracy. Yeah. Theft is what it all boils down to, yes. I really wouldn't know. You'd have to ask Terry Nation about that. I suspect there would be violence in it and sex, because that sells. Candidly.
More now than 10 years.
Yes, more now than 10 years ago. Although I think it can be done subtly. If you look at the 40s movies, the sex in the 40s movies, the violence in the 40s movies was suggested rather than very visual. And it was much more violent, much more sexy as a result. And I think, we were talking about James Bond earlier on, the earlier Bond films were better because Connery was so marvellous in them, and because it was so understated. Now it's become ridiculous. I mean, he's become Superman / Captain Kirk, you know. I mean, Dick William Shatner as James Bond. Hey. T.J. Bond. Yes, sir.
Supposing you could appear in one of the classic movies, which one of them was wrong?
One of the great classic movies was very easy to answer, and I'd like to play Rick Blaine in Casablanca. Here we are. Wonderful, wonderful part.
With who was the co-star?
With who is the co-star?
Sorry.
With whom is the co-star? Thank you, yes. Oh, in the Ingrid Bergman part. Well, of course, I have to say it because she's sitting at the back. Janet Lee's Price. Yes. I really mean Brooke Shields. Yes. To whom she bears a striking resemblance. Yes. It would be lovely to do. Yeah, great. Michael would be wonderful in the Peter Lorre part. And Gareth could play the Sidney Greenstreet part. No, that would have to be David Jackson, wouldn't it? No, it would be lovely to do that. Or I'd love to do a Western. I'd love to play Shane. Have anybody seen the Western Shane? Wonderful. It's a cry of my youth, come back Shane, you know. Oh, I always wanted to come back because he was the pure hero. But there you go. We're all flawed heroes now. Yes?
One thing about that scene that has come out as a new television is continuing subplot. Like Seven originally didn't have that. It was a small amount of scenes that carried over to develop the character. If they did another series, would you like to see any continuing subplot introduced? And if it was, what would you like?
The lady says that unlike other series, there were continuing subplots in Lake 7. In the event that it was done again, would I like to see that continue? Yes, of course. Because it makes it interesting for the sub-actors, if you know what I mean. I don't mean that they're lesser actors. It means that they're lesser characters at a particular time. But you also keep the interest in the major characters going when, say, another character is featured more strongly. Like, for example, when Tarrant was featured in Sand, there was, we get back to your question, there was nonetheless the subplot of the relationship that Avon had had, such as it was with Sutherland. So you kept that going. That then spilled over into the next episode, and so on. Yes, of course. It's always very helpful. Shakespeare did it 400 years ago, and nobody's bettered it. Yes?
In Series 3, Kelly has a line in one of the episodes about, why do you think I'm staying around? Love with him. Would you have liked to have seen a relationship develop between you and Kelly?
Would I have liked to have seen a relationship develop between Avon and Callie? There was a kind of relationship, yes. Mutual respect, rather, as we were talking about the Avon-Villa relationship. You should remember that very early on, and I never forgot it, that Avon turned to Blake and said, let's dump her. Very early on, he said that. And I was always very conscious of what I call the key line in the development of the character that I was playing. Some actors are less so, but I'm very conscious of it. I never ever forgot that. So you never fully have trusted her. Consequently, the relationship would be doomed. Also, he was utterly ruthless, particularly with women. You like that, don't you, Ellen? Ruthlessness with women. Yes, go on.
Right. Ben Killer, you came up against an old movie. What was...
And whom? Sorry.
Whatever you like to call it.
Killer. Are you talking about?
I'm not sure.
Killer.
Oh, Tinus. Killer. Oh, I beg your pardon, yes.
What was the actual crime you were about to do a blackmail?
my book. Tyner's features very strongly in my book. They were in the banking system together, and they did each other favors. Read my book. It's going to be wonderful. You'll love every page of it. Tyner's features quite strongly in my book, as does Anna Grant. Yes, he's in there. Very briefly, I didn't like him. The person who got the first question right actually gets the booby prize. They get to have lunch in about half an hour with Michael Keating. The joy of that is that he's actually going to pay for it. All right? The one who gets the second question right gets lunch with me. Don't worry, you'll be safe. And the third question, winner, gets lunch with Janet. You know? But I do ask the person who has lunch with Michael to be very careful of the moth in his wabbit. Very fond of it. Lunch with Michael Keating.
92.
92, his age.
Paul's, I was going to say Paul's age.
No, you. What is the answer?
14.
Is correct.
What's the 14th?
What's the 14th episode?
Project Avalanche, playing Nicole Stephen Darcy's class.
Right. She played Zoom in 13 episodes, but she played a mutoid earlier on. That's why it's a slightly trick question. Okay, so you get lunch with Michael Keating. Commiseration.
Now for the tough.
Now the really good one, the great lunch. You call a number. This is which internationally famous classical actor shares the name Kerr with Avon? And Kathy will call a number.
First chance, 68.
68. Gareth Thomas's age. No 68 here.
Either that or they're too scared.
Well, it's all right. You can fail.
Yeah. 125.
125. Oh. Ronald Kerr Reagan. That's wonderful. I wish it was right. Very good.
90.
90. You don't know.
Number 1.
Number 1. Who's number 1? You're number 1. Sir Lawrence Kerr Olivier is correct.
85.
85, yes.
Thomas
Yes, actually, that's right. Yes, yes, that's very good. Yes. Curiously enough, I was thinking of Tyner's Keeler, which Roy played, and Villa played to know Avon before he went played. But yes, you're quite right. Delbrand, I forgot. Okay, so those are the 3 lunches. You get lunch with Janet. The poor soul who got the first question right gets lunch with Michael, and the table's booked, and we will go down there shortly. But we have 3 minutes, and so we'll take 3 last questions on this, the most scintillating panel of all, and then we'll go to lunch. You had your hand up first, ma'am. If the ship, the Liberator, is faster and better, why do you keep coming up back to Earth or meeting up with Serverland when we could really run away? Good question. If we did run away, you wouldn't have had a series, would you? I think I maybe have covered that earlier on, in that we had this wonderful equipment and we had to think then of ways for it to go wrong so that we could have the dramatic conflict. So that the series could continue. And I think they got a bit carried away by that, you know, the teleportation and so on. But that's the reason, the practical reason, that you don't have a drama if we don't get caught. So we have to find things to go wrong. 2 more questions, yes, ma'am.
Do you find that any writers, ever have one major problem with the character very long time?
Do I find that writers have a problem, either fan writers or professional? Why are you yawning there? You with the red hair. Disgraceful. Do writers have difficulty with the character of Avon? Any major problems? No, because he's fairly enigmatic, so it's up to you to interpret what he is, what he thinks, etc., etc. I think where fan writers, such as the fan fiction that I have read, falls down, is that they try to give Avon more than is actually there. The trick is to leave the enigma, just to hint at something. What they try and do, fan writers, is, well, he feels this way because he was in love with Anna Grant and such and such and such and such, and it goes on for pages and pages and pages, and it may or may not be true. So it's quite interesting, though. But that's a problem that they do have, yes. But the trick in writing is to keep it simple, as Terry Nation will certainly tell you refusely. Okay, last question, sir, with the beard.
If Avon attended a men's self-awareness class, do you think he'd express his feelings better?
I don't think I get a bigger round of applause than that. That's the end.